Hi, everybody. It's Professor Grady here, and we are going to do our first lecture of 214, which will essentially be the modeling toolkit in a nutshell. It's reviewing a whole bunch of techniques that you learned in Modeling 1, because let's face it, you probably took Lot Modeling 1 last summer or last spring, and over the summer, maybe you've forgotten some of the skills that you needed. So we are going to go over them, and maybe I can show you a little something new too. We all have our personal way of doing things, and maybe I can show you a way to do something that you didn't know before. So one of the things that we're going to start out doing is just talking about dealing with quads, right? So you know that we like to model with quads, and a lot of times the question I get is, if the game engine triangulates the model, why do you model in quads? Well, it's because there's a couple of reasons. One is the way that you want to control how the game engine triangulates your model. So I have a quad right here, right? The way that the game engine triangulates quads, it creates a edge from one vert to another across the quad. Another reason that we like quads is sometimes your normals, or like how the mesh is going to be shaded, doesn't like triangles. So there will be times where you'll have like a little triangle. This happens a lot in character modeling, where there's just one little area that is a little hard, and even though you soften that edge, it still shows up in the game engine because it's triangulated in a weird place. Lastly, some softwares won't even accept triangles. So if I brought this super basic cylinder into Maya, not Maya, we're in Maya right now, into ZBrush, it would give me a warning about these triangles. Can I brute force it? Probably. But let's not try to brute force things and model with quads. Sometimes triangles are necessary, especially if it's some background item. So and it's not for animation. So I have this super basic cylinder, right? If this was a cylinder that was just supposed to be in the background, it didn't have any animation, it was just part of the environment, I would, and let's say it would be a barrel, I would probably just, let's actually go to our modeling toolkit, our little cube with the hammer. I'm going to turn on object Y. There we go. There we go. I can just insert in some edge loops, scale them as needed, maybe throw down a bevel on some certain edges. Let's turn off symmetry, give it one more edge loop for good measure. Make it a little taller too. We'll just straight up regular scale the object to make it taller. And I like to put my pivot points at the bottom, but we won't mess with that right now. But the point is, except that side that I messed with earlier, that's pretty much a barrel. And I could texture that and get away with it, especially in something like a mobile game. But this class is all about you upping your modeling game. You're going to make projects that are more complex. We even want to make some AAA game assets. We're going to think about modeling for animation. We're going to think about modeling modularly. We're going to focus on much more complex, detailed models. So this is not the kind of work we're going to be doing in this class. Because of that, I'm going to show you how to take a basic cylinder and make it all quads. I'm also going to do something that's called a continuous mesh. A continuous mesh is a mesh that isn't made of different parts. It's just one object with all vertices merged. It's watertight. If I filled it with water, nothing would leak out. Would I make like a little mace. This is called an Inca Baladoria flail. Would it make something like this continuous typically? Probably not, but I want to make the rope specifically continuous for joints, right? And there's other exceptions, like continuous meshes are really more of a like facial animation kind of thing. But I think it's a good exercise to get you how to think of modeling differently. So that's what we're going to do today. We'll start out with making a cylinder all quads. And we're also going to start out with me going over the Super Maya basics, like moving around. Let's do that now. Alt left click, rotate. Alt right click, zoom in and out. You can also zoom in and out with your scroll wheel at specific instances. Alt middle mouse button, pan. Make sure when you're using a 3D program, you're always using a mouse with a middle mouse button. Right click will allow you to pick all your different modes from object mode, vertex mode, face mode. Some people will do it up here in the modeling toolkit, but that is slow. I highly encourage you to learn how to do the wheel. What other super basic move things? Super basic 3D move things. W allows me to move the objects. If I click these little squares, it will move it in specific, just those axes, so I don't accidentally fling it off to existence. Never move it from the square. That's the way to fling it off into existence and never see it again. You can also go to your orthographic views on the left with the little windows. In these views, you will be locked to one axis. This allows you to, or rather, only be able to move on two axes. This allows you to click like crazy. One of the biggest mistakes I see in young 3D artists is they're not using their orthographic views like they should. You should be switching back and forth between your orthographic and perspective views like an old man changes the channel. If I hover into one of these viewports and I hit spacebar on my keyboard, it will flood my viewport with that view. You also have different modes. Our modes are as follows. 1, just vanilla shaded geometric mode. 2, it shows you a smooth preview with the geometric wireframe. 3, and again, these are just numbers on my keyboard. 3 is smooth preview. This allows me to see what my object would look like if I smoothed it. 4 is straight up wireframe. I can hit back to 1 and see my wireframe in the geometric view. 5 is shaded view. 6 is textured view, which I don't have a texture on it right now, so you aren't seeing any of that. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. Now that is recorded for prosperity. I think I said that right. Getting back into fast modeling in a nutshell mode. 6 is textured mode. I do not have a texture right now, so nothing happens. 7 is lit mode. This shows your lights. Since I have not added any lights to my scene, 7 just looks like pure darkness. We can switch back to 5 and 1. One more thing in your modeling in a nutshell, just moving around Maya. We have 4 different little boxes here. One is your modeling toolkit. That's going to be your best friend. This is probably the one you're most familiar with. I know a lot of people also really love the attribute editor, and a lot of the things you can do from something called the channel box, you can also do from the attribute editor, like add divisions, etc. You'll see me adding most of my divisions and changing my scale, my rotation, etc. from the channel box. That's what I'm used to as an animator. You also have for your Maya primitives, you have inputs in the channel box. This is where you can add divisions, change height of divisions, change your caps, etc. And we are going to start here converting our cylinder into quads. So we're going to make it where it has 16 axes. We want it a number divided by 4. Just 2 height divisions, so I have something in the middle. and 0 caps. This gives us a big end-on on the top and bottom. Remember that while triangles are sometimes okay, end-ons never are. Yes, the engine will triangulate an end-on, but most likely it's going to spit out your model like a baby spits out broccoli. So I'm going to, once I've added my divisions, I'm going to hold down X. X is your grid snap, and snap it to the center. Let's move it up. I'm also going to move my pivot point to the bottom of my mesh here. I can do that by going into vertex. Oh, never mind. By holding down D as in dog. And you'll see all of your magnets in the upper left-hand corner. We have snap to grid, snap to curve, snap to point, snap to projected center. Don't really use that one. Maybe y'all do. I don't. Snap to planes and live surface, which is going to be your new best friend later in this semester. But we're going to turn on snap to point so we can snap that vertice to, or snap that pivot point to a vertice down at the bottom there. Ideally, if I should have snapped it when I still had a cap, so it would have been nice dead center. I may still be able to see if I can still, nah, it won't let me do that. But that's fine. That is fine. I just want to make sure that it's level to the grid. So I release that. I'm going to hold down X and make sure that it is nice and flat and level to my stage. Now, I am going to kind of move this over so these edges are kind of aligned with the grid in case if I wanted to mirror or something like that. And I'm going to go over to my multi-cut tool. And I'm going to start drawing my quads. Now, normally you always insert edge loops. You don't use the multi-cut to just draw random edges. When you have the multi-cut tool selected and you hold down on Control, it will allow you to insert an edge loop. If you hold down Shift, it will snap where that edge loop will go. So it's like really easy to just throw an edge in the center without having to measure or scale anything. But we are actually going to draw some today. We also want to make sure we don't have to do it twice because we want this to be applied to the top and bottom. So I'm going to turn on symmetry, object, Y, because that's up and down, right? X is left and right, Z is forward and backward. And now I can start drawing across and making a cylinder that is all quads. Don't do that one because we're going to do this. We're going to go across with it. Boom. Now I have a cylinder that's all quads that took about 2 seconds to make. And one thing that's really cool, I could actually save out this as like an OBJ, and anytime I just want a starter cylinder that's all quads, I could use this. Honestly, I usually start with a cube or I just start with a cylinder that's really low poly so I could just multi-cut that really quickly when I'm worried about an object that I want to be rounded being cylindrical. Let's start to make the head of our mace. One of the things that I really remind students is never be afraid to go in there and actually scale your edge loops. And then insert edge loops as needed to start rounding stuff out. There's a really cool option on your multi-cut toolkit called Edit Edge Flow. So I'm going to hit multi-cut here, and you can see there's this thing called Edit Edge Flow. And what Edit Edge Flow does, it allows you to insert an edge loop and it will automatically round it out for you. One of the things that's really good to do as well is bounce between your multiple modes. I usually model in vertex mode. I rarely model with edge mode. Sometimes I'll model with faces, but I usually am not moved. I just turned that snap on. My snap was still off. My snap was still on. I'm usually not messing with faces unless if I'm about to extrude something. I'm usually messing with vertices. Another thing that I can do to round this out is bevel. I'm going to bevel that. And I can increase the fraction, and that will help it bevel. You always can change these guys because Maya keeps all of your history. So once it's beveled, I can actually come back here and go to that bevel and still change my options. Now, this is not quite where I want it. My bevel didn't turn out too good. But if I try to move this by hand, it can be a little tricky. Let's see how the computer can help us out a little bit. One thing we can do something called a transform constraint. This allows you to slide along an edge. So I'm going to come over here, edge slide. And you can see I can start moving these edges around to help me round out my object. Let's look back at our reference. So one thing, this guy's a little oblong. So we'll deal with that in a moment. But I need another edge loop here, so I'm going to turn off my transform constraint, insert an edge loop, make sure edit edge flow is turned on. And here's a fun fact. I'm going to show you two tools that are not in your modeling toolkit. And that is Edit Edge Flow and Circulize. Circulize is right up here, and it's my favorite tool in Maya. What it does, it will take any edge loop or anything that has, you can use verts, you can use a face. You just need a certain number of points. You need at least 8 because that makes an octagon, right? If I click Circulize, it will make my edge loop perfectly circular. Also remember, if you hit G on your keyboard, it will use the last tool that you used. There's also another tool called Edit Edge Flow, and it is similar to the Edit Edge Flow in the multi-cut, but you can do it without inserting an edge loop. Double click to select the entirety of an edge loop. Then go to Edit Edge Flow. Remember to press G for last tool used. I'm going to shrink this a little bit. Oop. Oh, that's interesting. It looks like I may have had... Oh, I see. It just wants me to select these. There we go. I'm going to shrink this in a little. And yeah, I can use these corners so it doesn't shrink on the y-axis. It's only shrinking on the X and Z. Edit these edge flows. Beautiful. And one thing I like about I just basically made my own sphere. And it's like, why? What was the purpose of that, Ryan? One, it kind of looks a little bit more handmade, which makes sense for a flail, like a medieval weapon. Like, it's not going to be, there's very, very rare things in nature that are perfectly round and clean. I mean, usually it's something very artificially made. And let's just look at the vanilla cylinder and compare the two meshes for a second. I want you to look how less dense this mesh is with no triangles. In general, you do not want more than 5 edges going to one vertice. So this thing, which is called a pole, is a problem, or can be a problem. That's the thing. It's like, uh, can poles happen sometimes? Yeah. Can triangles happen? Sometimes triangles are necessary for a lower poly count. Can n-gons happen? No. No. Let's show another thing that you may or may not know about. That's one of my personal favorite things, and that's soft selection. Soft selection is B as in boy on your keyboard, or really B as in brush. It gives like this area of effect. If I hold down B and drag off of the model with my left mouse button and move, I'm holding both that down, B, left mouse button, and I'm moving my mouse left to right, you can see that I get this radius going on. And the yellow is what's being most affected, while the black is what's being less affected. And so I can organically size my model and change that fallout. So let's go ahead and give it that oblong shape like in our reference. I'm going to insert an edge loop in the middle there. I really don't need this edge loop across, but I'm just going to leave it in for now. We can use it later. Because we're going to use the next thing that is on our list, which is extrude. Extrude is basically how you should be making all of your models. Here's what you shouldn't be doing. Don't just make a sphere, then make a cylinder. Don't edit any divisions to make it low poly or optimize. Just stick it in there, boom, you have a mace, we're done. If you do this, you will receive a 0 on 0. There's so much wrong with this. While using two separate meshes is fine, having meshes just stuck in here like that, like this is all things that will take up your UV space. It will cause normal or shading issues or Z fighting sometimes. There are times that, yeah, maybe I want spikes on this and I'm going to make a cylinder with a really, really small tip. Don't use a cone, that's a pole. And I may stick it in there, but then I may come in, insert an edge loop right where it's near the surface. So then I can come inside of this mesh and delete those faces. Oh, I accidentally grabbed one. So I just want you to think about that when you're making your models is like, you don't want to build them like Legos. You want to build them how you would have to mold them in real life per se. Okay, so we have these faces selected and we're going to extrude out. One thing, when you hit extrude, make sure you always hit W, E, or R straight after. The pivot point on extrude, there's only one way to put it. It's just really gross. And it can cause kind of weird things. A lot of weird things can happen when you're extruding. Also, don't go to the bathroom when you're extruding because, like, if I hit extrude and then I go to the bathroom and I click off accidentally and then I select that face again and extrude again, I suddenly have two faces on top of each other, and that is a problem. So just make sure that you're very present when you are extruding. Okay, so we got our little rim there. I have a couple of options here. I could extrude along the curve, which is actually what we're going to do. I could also make my tube separately or my rope separately. Um, and in a lot of ways, that's the better way to make it, especially since if you use something called sweep, it will UV the cylinder for you. And sometimes cylinders, especially curvy ones, can be really hard to UV. But we're gonna have a little fun. We're gonna do this through extrusion. So I'm gonna go into my orthographic views, and I'm going to go and I'm going to grab one of my curve tools. I like the EP curve. I know everyone's all about that Bezier curve, but it doesn't work like other Bezier curves. So I rather just use the EP. I can hold down X so I start at the center. Let's see. What does that look like? So it kind of curves. Oh, it doesn't come from that corner. It comes from the side. Okay. I'm glad I looked at my reference then. So we're going to hit undo and we're going to do it from this side. That's actually going to make our lives harder in some ways, easier in others. We'll start to make a nice little curve here. Okay. Let's make sure it's all in the right place. I do want it like that on the side. That's good. That's good. Excellent. So I'm going to come in here now. And if you remember, I mentioned something about circulars only needing 8 edges to become a circle, right? Because we can always smooth this and make it rounder. We can go back and add edges. There's all sorts of things we can do to round stuff out. And that's a step that I think people forget. We were always told, don't go high poly too fast. Don't go high poly too fast. And you shouldn't. But you still need to go back and round things after being blocky. Like, don't leave your stuff looking like an N64 graphic. Let's go here and we're going to hit extrude. I'm just going to squeeze this in here. Pull it out just a little. And we are going to use circularize to turn it into a circle. Shrink it down. And hit circularize again. There we go. Now I can shift click the curve. I'm going to turn off symmetry. It doesn't like that I have symmetry turned on. There we go. Yeah. Okay. And we're going to hit extrude, and it's going to extrude along that curve. Now, right now, it went straight to the opposite end, but if we add divisions, it will start to round out. It's a little thin, but I kind of like how that turned out. um, and it's thin because based off of where it can. Let's see if I can increase the thickness. We don't want to do that. Let's go into our channel box, and we're going to look at local scale. There we go. That gives us nothing of what we want. We might want to try taper. There we go. That's more like it. Oh, that's so much better. Okay. That makes me happy. So now I'm going to come here and I'm going to make like a little knot in our reference. This little thing right here. And one thing, I still have edit edge flow turned on. I kind of don't want it on. I want to do all my scaling manually right now. Hold it down, control, insert an edge loop. It's a pretty thick knot. And I'm a big believer in not worrying about things being exact to trust your eyes. But, I also I'm also was traditionally trained, and we spent a lot of time training our eyes to do things without tools that may or may not be available. So, okay, I kind of like the way that looks. I might insert one edge loop. Yeah, that looks nice. No, I like it the other way. Okay. So I'm not going to worry about adding the kind of bumpy rope texture for now, especially for just a demonstration. But there's one more modeling toolkit thing that I think is really good to learn that or review that we haven't gone over, and that's bridge. We could talk about smooth tool, but smooth as well, but I want to hold off on that for now. We can kind of talk more about that in later projects. Because again, this isn't like this is the review of the basics, right? Review of super basics. And right now, we still kind of want you to stay away from the smooth tool, but I am going to show you how to use it more dynamically this semester. Maybe dynamic is not the right term. A more trustworthy way. So, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to let oh no, did say we were going to make this all quads, didn't or all a continuous mesh, didn't we? So, you know what? We're going to do that. I'm going to select both sides of this here. And I actually am going to turn on symmetry object X, even though note that sometimes when we do extrusions, symmetry does not like them. Sometimes it doesn't even like its symmetry. Oh, does it need to be Z? Let's see if that. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to select these here. Notice I'm selecting for faces. I wonder if there's a reason for that. We're going to hit extrude. I'm going to scale it in, pull it out. And I'm going to scale it on itself so I can just straight pull it out like this. Then I can insert an edge loop right here. I'm going to make sure that edge loop is nice and straight. I'm going to just insert edge loops really, really close to this edge. So that way this circle shape will be maintained while I make these circle shapes. Circularize. I need to pull it out a little bit. I need to rotate it this way a little bit. Let's make sure to give a little friend here room. And I should have done these at the same time. But I was chicken. I was scared. I was scared. Now, would it have been easier to have just extruded these, made these separate objects? Yes. And this is a good area to make those second objects. It's just I really want to show you that I can do this without making separate objects for the sake of the exercise. Okay. So you can bridge two faces that have the same number of edges, same number of vertices, right? And what's really cool about bridge is you can use that to create really smooth arcs. So I'm going to select these shapes here, and I think I have to turn symmetry off for this to work. So we're going to turn symmetry off. I'm going to hit bridge. Now it's going to go straight across, kind of like our extrude along a curve did. You may notice that when I add more divisions, it doesn't fix the problem. That's because we have to tell it we want a rainbow. Right now it's doing the curve type linear, which means it's going in a straight line. We need to click on that and drag left to right to change it to blend. We're starting to get something better, but it's going inside of the mesh here, which is not something that we want. So I'm going to change my directions. And now we have a nice little bridge handle here. And I am going to move this up significantly. Maybe turn on a little bit of soft select. Not that much. Steph's using soft select. I'm just going to grab these other edges and pull. Ooh. Let's see. How big is it in our reference? Not that big. Maybe more like that. Actually, it's a little longer. No, that's right. That looks good. Now I can come in and I can start check edge flow and start curving it out. I definitely want to make sure do this with symmetry. Object C. Oh, is my symmetry broken? My symmetry, I think, is broken. So I would have to mirror it to get my symmetry turned back on. That would be a good thing to show, but it's not super basic and I don't want to show it today. So we're just going to have to do the best we can. Okay. So now we have a little curvy shape, right? Now, one thing that is really distinct in this design is it has that braided rope. And I'm not modeling a braided rope. Let's pretend this is going into the Quest, or the Nintendo Switch, like something that still needs to look slick but needs to be really optimized. Sorry, that is Lulu. She's very upset about something that is going on outside. You can see I'm going around and scaling these on their axes so they're nice and even. It doesn't work for all of them, but it does help with some of them. Just straighten them out a little bit. And I'm trying to make them even, essentially. I'm not going to worry about it being exact. There are 100 different ways if I wanted it to be exact that I could make it exact. But that's just not really my concern right now. As long as it looks good and functions in a game engine, it doesn't have to be perfectly even. Sometimes when things are mathematically even, they actually look very unnatural. Okay. So here's what I have a couple of things that I can do. I can go around to each one of these edges and bevel them. That would give me a lot of edges, but I think I'm okay with that considering what I want to do next. Bevel. Perfect. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to all these little bevels that I've created. Oh, I just realized it will scale them to the center, so I, I need to local scale them. Let me see if it will let me local scale. I could extrude inward and do a local scale. That might be what I have to do. It creates more edges though, and I don't need those edges. That's what I'm going to do, because that's the easiest way to do it. Why are you unhappy, thing? There we go. So to select these multiple faces, I'm just clicking on one and double clicking the other. If you just double click one, it will select all the faces in the model, which is not what we want. Okay. Oh, I didn't bevel that edge. I'll go back and do it. It will be fine. So if I hit extrude here, it's going to give me only these options, and none of these options are what I want. I can do offset, which is close to what I'm trying to do. But what I really want to do is I want to create an extrude inwards. I think I can do reverse thickness as well. Yeah, that's actually exactly what I want. So I'm going to type that in. I don't want it to be that extreme. Let's do -0.008. Not quite enough. That's not quite enough. Let's bring it up to 5. A little bit more. Let's try 7. And I'll have to quickly do this one because it looks so awkward without it. And see, like, you could try to use something called mesh. We're going to learn about that. We're going to learn about instances. We're going to learn about all this stuff. But sometimes you just need to get in there and just make it. All these crazy techniques are sometimes more trouble than they're worth. For this, I probably would have made this as one big thing and then used a bin deformer to maybe shrink it. But this works fine. There we go. From a distance, that doesn't look that bad. I think I'm just going to use some soft select to make it feel a little more organic. Because I just want it to feel like it. It doesn't have to be exact. Yeah, that looks nice. I'm going to bring these closer together. Not that much. Yeah, I think that looks a little better. Now, let's talk about normals. Right now, you'll notice that these guys are very planar. This little guy is looking pretty smooth, but this is looking very planar, and we don't want that. You think the way that it's shaded is due to its normals. I can go up to mesh display, and I want to make sure my normals are unlocked. And then I'm going to go up to mesh display, and I'm going to go to soften edge. If there was something that I wanted to be really hard edge, like maybe I would want these to be a little bit more hard edge, I can come in and select those edges, and I can go and click mesh display, harden edge. And now those will appear as harder edges. And that looks pretty good. You put some textures on it. And I mean, yeah, we don't have the little rope. We don't have the little rivets. The braid is very faked. But if let's say this was for a MOBA on the Switch, right? Then it's gonna be like this size. So you have to think about that when you model too. Now, this being said, I'm doing this. Another reason I'm making a very simplified version of this is because it's for demonstration and I don't want to take up like 6 hours of your time. Um, because you're going to be needing those 6 hours to make much more complex props. And that's the thing. Everything that you make in this class, well, yeah, we want to think about optimization. It should make us go, wow. So really think about how you can be ambitious with your models. Thanks, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.